For the past 2 decades, we've been trapped in a nutrition war that never should have existed. We were told that health depends on choosing the right side. Either slash your carbs to almost zero or slash your fat like it's poison. Pick a camp, defend it, fight for it. On one side, the low-carb movement tells you fruit is dangerous, grains are the enemy, and bread is basically sugar in disguise. But somehow, a plate loaded with processed meat and cheese is considered a victory. On the other side, the low-fat crowd warns you about egg yolks and cooking oils, yet happily fills grocery carts with boxes labeled fat-free that are packed with refined starches and added sugars. Both sides turned food into arithmetic, count the grams, track the percentages, obsess over the label. But what if the equation itself is flawed? In February 2026, researchers at Harvard released data from one of the largest long-term nutrition studies ever conducted. They followed more than 200,000 individuals for 3 decades, and what they found disrupts the entire carb versus fat debate. People who believed they were eating healthy based purely on diet labels were often increasing their cardiovascular risk. At the same time, the researchers uncovered a remarkably simple shift that lowered heart disease risk by roughly 15%. To understand why this matters, we have to expose the real trap in modern nutrition, the name of the diet. For years, we evaluated diets by category. Low carb sounded disciplined, low fat sounded responsible. The label itself felt reassuring. But the researchers discovered something critical. The label tells you almost nothing about what's actually happening inside your body. Imagine 2 meals. One is a bunless burger with processed bacon and sausage, very low in carbohydrates. By the old rules, that's a win. The other meal includes oats, berries, walnuts, and avocado. It includes both carbohydrates and fats. By traditional diet math, that's questionable. Yet the long-term data revealed something uncomfortable. If your eating pattern is built around highly processed foods and heavy animal products, your heart risk rises, regardless of how low your carb count is. If your meals center on minimally processed, plant-rich foods, your risk drops significantly. The real question was never how many carbs or how much fat. The real question is about something far simpler and far more powerful: quality.
You might be wondering how researchers could be so certain. Did they simply ask people what they were eating and trust their answers? That's where this study becomes different. Most older nutrition research relied heavily on memory. Participants filled out surveys. They estimated portions. They tried to recall what they ate years ago. Memory is unreliable. People forget. People underestimate. People report what sounds healthy. But in this case, scientists went beyond questionnaires. They examined blood samples. Your bloodstream records what you consistently eat. It reflects patterns, not intentions. It doesn't care what diet you claim to follow. It responds to what you actually put on your plate. When researchers analyzed these blood samples, they focused on measurable indicators linked to cardiovascular health. Instead of using complex terminology, think of it this way. Imagine your blood vessels as a network of pipes. When participants consumed diets built around whole grains, legumes, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and plant-based oils, something noticeable happened inside those pipes. Levels of HDL, often called good cholesterol, increased. But instead of thinking of HDL as a number on a lab report, picture it as a cleanup crew. These particles circulate through your bloodstream, collecting excess cholesterol from artery walls and transporting it away for processing. Higher quality diets were associated with more of these cleanup crews moving efficiently through the system. At the same time, researchers tracked triglycerides. Think of triglycerides as thick residue. Diets heavy in refined starches, added sugars, and processed meats were linked to elevated levels of this residue in the blood. More residue means more buildup. More buildup means narrower passageways. Narrower passageways force the heart to work harder to push blood forward. The contrast was clear. Individuals whose diets emphasized minimally processed, plant-forward foods showed higher cleanup activity and lower residue levels. Those whose meals centered around processed products and heavy animal fats showed the opposite pattern. The difference was measurable. It wasn't theoretical. And that is why the reduction in heart disease risk wasn't a coincidence. It reflected changes happening inside the bloodstream, changes that accumulated over years. The debate was never about eliminating one macronutrient. It was about what kind of food those macronutrients came from.
So, if the old carb versus fat argument misses the point, what should you actually focus on? The lead researchers delivered a message that was surprisingly straightforward. Stop obsessing over cutting entire macronutrients. Stop dividing food into villains and heroes based on a single number. Instead, focus on one word: quality. But quality can sound vague unless you make it concrete. So here's a simple way to evaluate your next meal. Think of it as the close to the source test. If a food looks almost the same as it did when it came out of the ground, grew on a tree, or was harvested from a field, it's likely high quality. Your body recognizes it. It knows how to process it. If that food had to be refined, stripped of fiber, broken into powder, reshaped, sweetened, colored, and packaged with marketing claims, it's probably low quality, no matter what the label says about carbs or fat. Now let's translate that into 3 practical shifts you can make this week. First, upgrade your carbohydrates instead of eliminating them. Refined white bread, sugary breakfast cereals, and pastries are rapidly digested and spike blood sugar. Swap them for intact whole grains like oats, brown rice, or quinoa. These contain fiber that slows digestion, stabilizes energy, and supports healthier blood markers over time. Second, shift the source of your fats. Instead of relying heavily on butter, processed meats, or deep-fried foods, move toward plant-based fats. Cook with olive oil. Add almonds, walnuts, or seeds to your meals. Slice avocado onto salads or toast. These fats are associated with improved HDL levels, the cleanup crews we discussed earlier. Third, pivot your protein choices. This doesn't require eliminating animal products entirely, but reducing processed meats and replacing a few weekly meals with plant proteins can make a measurable difference. Beans, lentils, chickpeas, and tofu provide protein along with fiber and beneficial compounds that support cardiovascular health. None of these changes require complicated tracking apps or extreme restriction. They require paying attention to what the food actually is, not what the label claims it to be. That shift alone reframes the entire conversation about health. For years, we turned eating into a constant calculation. We brought numbers to the dinner table. We felt guilty over fruit because it contained carbohydrates. We avoided healthy fats because of outdated fears. We judged meals by spreadsheets instead of substance. This study offers something different. It removes the pressure to choose a camp. It removes the obsession with strict elimination. It replaces confusion with clarity. You don't need to fear carbohydrates. You don't need to fear fats. You need to look beyond the label. A diet built on minimally processed, plant-forward foods consistently supported better blood markers and lower long-term heart risk. A diet dominated by refined products and heavily processed animal foods consistently moved those markers in the wrong direction. The difference wasn't dramatic or extreme. It was steady, measurable, accumulative. And that's how heart disease develops, slowly, over decades. Small daily decisions compound. So do small improvements. You don't need a calculator to eat well. You don't need to follow a rigid ideology. You don't need to join an online diet tribe. The foundation is simple. Choose foods that resemble their natural form. Build your meals around plants. Use animal products thoughtfully instead of heavily. Prioritize fiber-rich grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and healthy oils. Let quality guide your choices, not fear. If this breakdown helped you rethink the carb versus fat debate, consider sharing it with someone who feels overwhelmed by diet advice. And if you want more clear, evidence-based explanations without the jargon or hype, subscribe so you don't miss the next video. I'd like to hear from you. What is one real, minimally processed food you can add to your meals this week? Leave it in the comments and let's build a practical list together. Health does not require extremes. It requires consistency and better ingredients.